There we go.
Well, compared to some of us, you are.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
The volume control on this thing.
yeah, as we are studying the laborers in the vineyard, what I thought, hey, Melanie,
Hi.
what I thought we would talk about to kind of just, icebreaker or whatever, tell a story of when you or someone you love was treated unfairly. You or someone you love was treated unfairly.
I remember once my oldest son came to visit me, and the Richardson cops pulled him over in front of the house because they didn't think he belonged in the neighborhood. Not saying his car was a piece of junk, but it was pretty much a piece of junk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, Scott's got, waist length hair.
Yeah. I've got one. I've got a friend named Chris Lee, and he, because of the color of his skin, he gets treated unfairly in different ways throughout, has done that throughout his life. Now, never mind that sometimes, my husband, who is white, has been treated unfairly because the tables need to be turned. But yeah, there's, not gotten a scholarship he needed or whatever. Yeah. Who else? A more personal story. My dad went on a trip to California when we were kids, like maybe 6 and 8, and my sister had been sick, recovering from a tonsillectomy, and he brought her back a Beatles poster, and I didn't get anything. I never mind she'd had a tonsillectomy. But he went away and didn't bring me anything. But yeah. It was unfair.
I know when my grandmother was about 50, I think I was in grade school at the time, she finally cut her braids off. She'd been wearing braids all of her life because she's half Comanche. And her hair was slightly curly, and my mom styled it for her. And people treated her differently from that moment on. And she made note of it.
Yeah.
That she didn't look like a squaw anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The Comanches treated her differently?
No, the white people did because she was a half-breed. Yeah.
So they treat after
Indians in the Southwest were not considered to be human by whatever standards. They were the other.
Mm-hmm. Any others?
Mine's a little bit different. I was treated a little differently because my last name, it was a big name in our town, and it was, my main name was Dalrymple, and that was the biggest road and bridge construction company in the Northeast, and my family owned that. And so people treated me differently and thought that I was, just judged me as just being, a rich snob when they didn't even know me. And so when I went to college, which was still in the Northeast, I never told my last name.
Wow.
So because people would, I didn't want people to have preconceived notions of me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good story. Any others? Come on, we've all got them. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm always a little bit late.
That's
We're
okay.
glad you're here.
It's a nice beach.
Virtual headmistress here at School Brackets.
Oh, there you go.
What
Yeah.
was the question?
The question is a time when you or someone you love was treated unfairly. Yeehaw.
So many. Well, I have lots of examples of with my oldest son who's been treated unfairly with his mental differences, his neurological differences, and autism and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult because, you know, with the physical handicap, people can see what's going on. You know, they don't say like, oh, well, just get out of that wheelchair and walk up those stairs. Why can't you walk up those stairs?
Yeah.
But neurological difference, you can't see it. And it's hard not to expect that someone with that can do just the same things as a neurotypical person.
Yeah.
Not a lot of
I can relate to that. My granddaughter, who's going through this eating disorder, has been in a program that's quite expensive, and the insurance company's been paying for it. But my daughter got notification that they're only going to pay for half of it now. So she'll only be able to go 3 hours because she's not showing physical signs. She doesn't have, you know, she's not physically ill, but, you know, she needs this program, and it's going to be really expensive for my daughter and her husband to put her somewhere and pay out of the pocket, you know. So they're really having a lot of trouble figuring out what's next.
Yeah.
To have a cap on mental health coverage with the employer-based health insurance, because Scott was in Timberlawn and they only paid for the first 2 months.
Ooh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It got to be really expensive after that.
Mm-hmm.
Texas rates very low among the states for mental health care.
Oh yeah, well, they're not supposed to do that anymore, but they do.
Mm-hmm. Any more stories from childhood?
Well, I always thought I was treated unfairly by my sister and my brother because I was the youngest one.
Would that be the spoiled baby?
Could be.
Maybe that's why we're so strong.
Yeah.
And of course, on the other side, those of us who are the oldest, we had to have all the rules, and then the younger siblings float on by.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, we just figure it out, which ones, how to break them.
I were both in high school. My mom would measure my skirts and dresses every day. They had to be, you know, so many inches to the knee and fingertips and all that. And my sister could wear these little tiny short shorts and little tiny short skirts. And I would say, Mom, that's so unfair. How come she can wear those and I can't? She said, Heather, you're 5'9" and she's 5'2". It looks entirely different.
Oh, that's a great example. Oh my gosh. So great. Yeah. So, any others? Okay, let me share my screen here. I just want to.
Can I say something really quick?
Sure. Uh-huh.
Right now, and you may have said it, I came in a little bit late, but Karen Cosby is having surgery, breast cancer surgery right now. So
Yes,
prayer.
we have prayed.
Oh, good.
Yes, we have prayed, and absolutely. So we can do it again. Stay with her.
While you're getting your screen, I'll say a silent prayer again.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. So, we're looking at laborers in the vineyard, and of course, Amy Jill Levine is going to have a different take. She's going to try to break us loose from preconceived ideas, and one of which is the title of this, which is "Laborers in the Vineyard," which in the NRSV, that is the actual, you know, someone has entitled the parable. And so we look at it maybe from the laborer's standpoint, and maybe in, like focusing on vineyard type work. But so I love this picture, and we'll get to the video. Here we are. Only one more week, and we've got an Advent study after that, which I think will be really good. Incarnation. So here we go.
The parable of the laborers in the vineyard might be called the parable of the very strange landowner. It's a wonderful story, one of Jesus' longer parables, and it goes something like this. Early in the morning, about 6 o'clock in the morning, a landowner goes out to look for laborers for the vineyard. So he goes to the local marketplace where day laborers would congregate, hoping that somebody would come and provide them employment. And he meets a number of them, and they agree. In fact, the Greek word is symphoneo. They come to an agreement on the usual daily wage, and he sends them out to the vineyard. So far, nothing peculiar has happened. But about 3 hours later, he goes back again, and he finds more laborers, and he says to them, you go out to the vineyard too. About 9 o'clock in the morning, not so bad. But then he comes out again at noontime, and he sees more laborers, and he sends them out to the vineyard. Still, there is some waiting. About 3 o'clock, he comes out again. So this guy's either a very peculiar landowner, or he's completely incompetent, or there's something else going on. And at 5 o'clock again, he goes out and he says to the people who are still there, why are you here? And they say, because nobody's hired us. And he says, well, you go out to the vineyard too. Very strange. At the end of the day, he lines up the workers and he says to his steward, line them up so that the last hired are over here, and then we'll work our way down to the first hired. And he pays the last hired the usual daily wage. The people who have been there since 6 o'clock in the morning are optimistic. If he's paid those folks who have only worked 1 hour, what he contracted with us, clearly will make more. But it turns out he pays everybody the same amount, the usual daily wage. The people who were hired first are incensed. You've made these other folks equal with us, they complain. How can you do this? But the landowner says, wait a minute. I choose to be generous. So you guys who are complaining, basically take your money and get out. This is a very strange parable. And for many people, it's a very disturbing parable because it doesn't seem fair. How people in the first century would have heard this parable may well have depended upon who those people were. Landowners may have taken a very different message than day laborers, and they may have taken a different message than the people at home whom those day laborers are sponsoring and supporting economically. Because interpreters typically take an allegorical approach, they immediately begin with, oh, the landowner must be God, and therefore the parable must have something to do with salvation, about getting into heaven. And the message becomes something along the lines of, it's not how much work you do, it's got nothing to do with what's sometimes called works righteousness, earning your way into heaven. It's all about grace. It's a lovely message, but I don't think first century Jews are getting that from the parable. Why? Because first century Jews don't look at salvation as something that's earned. Salvation is a gift fully given. Indeed, the idea of grace comes into the church from Judaism in the first place. First century Jews listening to this parable are thinking not about salvation, they're thinking about daily wage and how do I have enough to live through the day, and how am I going to be able to support my family, and what constitutes economic justice in the world, where Deuteronomy makes it very clear you have to care for the poor. So if we want to read the parable or hear the parable as a first century audience might, We might try to picture these laborers, because most of us and most of the people back then would not be identifying with the landlord, the lord of the vineyard. They would be among the wage pool, among the daily laborers. So what are they hearing, or what should they be hearing? Well, they're all part of the same labor pool. They all live in the same neighborhood. They're probably friends. They probably work together on a day-to-day basis. So what happens? The first group gets hired. We're happy for them. But do they advocate for the people who are left? Not a word. The landowner comes out again and still chooses more. And those people who did not have that original job are delighted, and they go into the vineyard. But there are still people who are left. And once again, the landowner comes out and he hires more. And these people weren't sure they were going to get hired at all. And they go to the vineyard and they're thrilled. And do they say anything about the people who are left? Not a word. And again, the landowner goes out. And again, people who did not have a job are so relieved that they will now have money to bring home to their families. But they don't say a word about the people who are left till at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Those folks who had been there since 6 o'clock in the morning finally have a job. And where's the sense of solidarity among the workers to say, but here are my friends, can't they go out to the vineyard as well? At the end, when everybody is paid the same amount, some of the laborers who had been there since early in the morning might not think that that's fair. They had worked more hours, they had worked harder in the broiling sun. It may not be fair, but it was just. It was justice that everybody gets the daily wage. And it would have been just as well as fair for those first hired to say, what about my friend here? What about my friend there? They also need a job. Can I advocate for them? Can you hire them as well? So what has the parable of the laborers in the vineyard got to do with the playground? The parable reminds me of when I was in elementary school and people would choose up sides, whether to play tag or to play baseball or whatever. You always wanted to be the first chosen, and the last thing you wanted was to be the last one left. And as people chose up sides, you ran over as soon as your name was called, and you were so happy to have been picked. But you never advocated for the people who were left. And even if there were only 2 of you left and one of you was chosen, hooray, you went. What about that last person who was there? How do we make sure that everybody is chosen, that no one is left behind, that no one is left without a place on the team, that no one is left without a job, that no one is left without a daily wage to take home to the family? When do we learn it's not just all about us, that we live in a community and it's our job to advocate for others who are in our community, to make sure that solidarity is there in terms of loving our neighbors as ourselves? The book of Deuteronomy talks about care for the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. And then it mandates means by which people can care for those who are vulnerable in society. Jesus has not read Marxist theory, and Jesus did not do economics 101 and 102 at Vanderbilt or anywhere else. But he is interested in economics because economics is part of what drives his tradition. The Torah is very clear about care for the poor. That's why you have to leave the corners of your grain fields ungleaned so that gleaners can come in. The parable itself talks about not only providing everybody a daily wage, but in fact, providing people the opportunity to work for themselves. Jesus is not talking here about charity. He's talking about justice. Everybody should have the opportunity to earn a living for his or for her family. So the responsibility here is not only on the labor pool to advocate for each other. Jesus is also talking to landowners. If you have resources, you have more than you need, allow people the dignity of working for you. Allow people the dignity of receiving a daily wage. Make it possible. It might not be the best thing you can do economically, but it is the best thing you can do in terms of living the way God would want you to live. And you know what's going to happen at the end of this parable? What can those first hired say? The only thing they could do is say, you know what? It might not have been fair, but look at how generous this landowner was. So the landowner gets the laborers he needs. He teaches the people in the labor pool a lesson, and he gets the reputation for generosity. Everybody at the end gets not only what's just, they get what I think perhaps we would want them to have. Jesus talks about the same thing. He talks about those who are economically vulnerable, those who are marginal in terms of daily wage, for example. So what do? Well, people in the churches will frequently just ignore the Deuteronomic law code. That's all law, and we don't do that. So they don't pay attention to the resources that the church gives them, because the Old Testament of the church is part of the church's Bible. And we immediately in the church allegorize the parables of Jesus away from daily life, away from economics, away from the mess of what it means to earn a living. And it's all about heaven and salvation and glory and kingdom. But Jesus is not just talking about salvation. He's talking as a first century Jew about how we sanctify daily life, until we can hear him as that first century Jew and recognize that he really is talking about our pocketbooks, about our responsibilities, about personal ethics. We're never fully going to be able to appreciate his message. And if we don't appreciate it, we can't live it.
Okay. Well, I love how she turns stuff around and upside down, a little bit like Jesus does. um, and you know what we've heard and are hearing each week, and she's kind of drumming it into our heads, is that Jesus is like the fulfillment. What Jesus is calling people to is the fulfillment of the Old Testament commandments. You know, I love that she was talking about the sanctifying daily life. Don't forget the Old Testament commandments in Deuteronomy to sanctify daily life. That and that it is not just about you; it is about the whole community. Now. So who had any like questions about, okay, so is Jesus a socialist? It sounds socialistic. Anyone hear that in this parable?
Absolutely. I thought it was weird that in the beginning of the chapter, she's talking about like, oh, people are taking this as Jesus being capitalist. I'm like, did they not study economics? This isn't capitalism. This is socialism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought that, I feel like she has a point, but sometimes she takes it a little bit too much one way. I think that there is the allegory that the landowner is God and that the denarius is salvation. And I think that some of it is that, she says that the Jews practice grace and all that, but they also believe that they're the chosen people. And that Jesus is opening up the chosen people to include more than just Jews. It still includes the Jews. They're still very important. They've still been there since the beginning, but it's opening it up to include more. And so I think part of it is, just you guys have been there from the very beginning. You've been following and you're in, you've got this, but I'm letting other people come in later. And for me, I've always taken this to not just be about then, but about now. Like I've been a Presbyterian since I was 3 years old. I've been in every Bible study, Sunday school class, youth group, elder, all that. And yet someone who's been a criminal their whole lives, who's murdered and raped and goes to prison, and they spend their whole life in there, if right before their execution, they ask God's forgiveness and they're in too. And that's not fair. So that's how I take this to be. I relate with the ones that came in at 6 a.m. as not fair, because even though I'm still getting the same thing I've been promised since birth, those people who made all those bad choices all that time, they get the same thing. That's my interpretation.
Yeah. Good. I mean,
But we have to think about the fact that all these years that you've been in, you've had the peace and freedom and joy that the criminal has missed out on. So that's a good thing
Like
about having come in early.
just like the older brother in the prodigal son parable from a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, great. Good. I love that. And I mean, I have trouble not seeing the landowner or the householder, as we will see, as God as well. But I think it's also because it says the kingdom of heaven is like, you know, and there's a landowner, and so, you know, who is the landowner? Well, it's the king, you know, the king of the kingdom of heaven. And so, yeah, to me, that's hard to disconnect. But yeah, I do think that she pushes on us. She does, but I think it's to also untangle what the preconceived ideas are, to see if there's more. And yeah, so I like that part. You know, the whole thing about is the, Melanie, were you going to say something?
Well, I see so many sides to this now, and I really, really liked what Heather said. She's so wise in her in her youth, her young age. And so I was thinking, you know, what she said about, you know, ethics and appreciation, and I remember when I was in school and I was captain of the team, you know, in gym, and they said you choose, and I hated that. So I would choose, because I always knew the kids who were never chosen, so I would choose them first, and not expecting, you know, anything from that. But then when she talked about ethics and appreciation, I would hope that the laborers or anybody in that situation in this day and age too, that everybody is paid the same, and everybody is cared for the same, that they would pay it forward and work hard, and not, I don't know if the original laborers at 6 a.m. were thinking the other ones were lazy. I don't know, but I would hope that then with all of that, there's a whole lot in that, but to pay it forward and to appreciate what you've been given, and ethically do the right thing.
Yeah.
I love.
I really like and I'm a lot with Heather too on this. Actually, I've grown up in the church and, you know, all those things like Heather talked about, and I certainly I see where she's coming and have always seen that parable sort of like that myself. But I really like the way she turns that upside down. I like the way she makes an economic issue, and I like the way that she says, you know, these are our brothers and our sisters or whatever, we're men here, and that we need to care. And in America, Americans, we are so into our individualism. I mean, look, we can't get people to wear masks for crying out loud, even though there's a medical proof that it will, you know, slow down or maybe flatten the curve. We can't do that here for some reason. And so she's pointing those kind of things out, that we need to care about those who come later, even though we were there at the beginning. And I just think there's a real lesson in that.
Yeah. And that is the commandment. I mean, that is the old commandment. It may have been polluted along the way. And I think that's part of the lesson too, is that the better we are at keeping the commandment, the better we are than our neighbor. You know?
That sounds a little self-righteous, Ellen.
Yeah. That's the problem. That's the human problem, is that we become then the older brother, because we're doing what's right, and so we're in. Yeah.
Or we're doing our own thing and we don't care about our others.
Yeah. Yes. That. Well.
I did agree with her when she said that it seemed like the last will be first and the first will be last. Seemed like it was tacked on to this story and didn't really apply, because it wasn't, even though the people came at 5, they weren't getting more, they were getting the same. It was that everybody ends up in an equal place, not that the last came first. I mean, the last got paid first, but they got paid the same amount. So I agreed with her that I didn't think that entirely fit with the parable.
Yeah, and I actually thought maybe it could have been part of the parable because of the way that I mean, maybe Matthew made, and it only appears in Matthew. Maybe Matthew made it up that the people who were the 11 o'clock people, we call them, the 5 o'clock people, really, that they got paid first. But in the parable, it's because then the people behind them thought, oh, well, I should get more, right? But the truth is, there's still truth in the last, the first shall be last. We need, that's part of that's part of the topsy-turvy kingdom. The first are to be last, and to make sure we are paying it forward, and we are, for the whole, rather than just about being first.
And I think Jesus say that about first being last. It didn't seem to me that it fit right in this place, particularly right after the parable to me.
Oh, you mean the final deal and so the first will be last. So yeah. That did feel tacked on. Yeah.
The 11 o'clock people?
Huh?
What did you mean about the 11 o'clock people?
That they were paid first. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the 11 o'clock service and the 9 o'clock service people.
The 11 o'clock people, oh my God, there. Yeah. Whoo.
I was thinking, oh my gosh,
11 o'clock people.
that's going to 11.
A lot of times you hear this on a 12 o'clock, the 12 o'clock time schedule. And so they talk about the 11th hour, the 11th hour people.
Ellen, it's not an unreasonable assumption for these people who came at 6 o'clock to assume they would be paid more because they worked harder, especially in this day and age. As Americans, and we're looking at it, from our perspective, we're really into fairness. Most people are into fairness, and it wasn't fair. It was just, but it wasn't fair for those people who came at 6 o'clock in the morning.
So actually, we're into half of fairness. We're into half of fairness that benefits us.
Right. So what she's trying to get us to do is to look at those 11th hour people as our neighbor, as our friend, and feel that they need the same thing that we need, and therefore they should be provided. And I guess that's where a socialistic idea comes in. We work according to our ability, we get paid according to our needs. So,
yeah. And we all know that, well, I don't know if anybody who's worked in the government, when you've got a system like that benefits the people who aren't working as hard. It's hard to work as hard as you've been working for that pay, for the same pay as someone else. Let's see.
Well, it's kind of like the physical gifts, talented athlete gets a ton of money nowadays, but it takes the whole team to get it across the finish line.
But have you ever worked on a group project where you did your work and you ended up doing somebody else's too, because they just decided they didn't want to do it?
Of course, I'm a woman.
Well, are men gonna hear this recorded sentence?
Yeah, Cynthia, we can't hear you. Wait, Cynthia, we got
muted.
I think you can apply this to almost any form of job. I mean, I can think of education of the teachers that hardly did anything, and those of us that worked really, really hard. and we all got the same on our check, you know, and those people that just came at 8 o'clock and left at 4 o'clock were rewarded the same as us who came at 7:20 or 7:15 and stayed until 6 o'clock. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I thought that too, Cynthia.
Yeah. And yes, all of that. I mean, this is a very rich parable. It's got lots of good stuff in it. So, you know, I do notice that, so about socialism, you know, it's like, so does that mean that the government should be, you know, I mean, is it that the government is, it's that responsibility to make everything equal? And I mean, what do you think? Is Jesus a socialist?
Well, in one respect, it's not the government who's paying these people and hiring these people. It's an individual person.
Yeah, and in one respect, it's God. You know, it is that God, you know, so to me, I really don't see that it is that the church, the body of Christ today, the church should be treating people like God, like the landowner is treating people, that there should be grace in the church, that we receive people at the 11th hour, whatever it is.
Like a parent-child relationship. We all
Ellen?
have children who mess up, and then there's the children that don't mess up.
Yeah, right.
And you're supposed to love them equally.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think
Ellen?
Make it harder than others.
Yeah. ML, go ahead.
I really liked the reference that she gave to 1 Samuel 30, 21 through 25, when David said, the share of the one who goes down into the battle shall be the same as the share of the one who stays by the baggage. You know, that was an Old Testament reference to the fact that even though these people could, and I think about being my age, and there's so much that I cannot do now that I was able to do when I was young and did. And you made the reference to the church, and I think that's very evident in my life, in the life of the church, because there's so much that I really can't do because my brain doesn't work like it used to. You know, I can't teach a Sunday school class because I can't remember anything. You know,
Not necessarily true. Okay.
but anyway, I liked her reference back to that 1 Samuel scripture.
Yeah, there's grace in that. There's
Yes.
grace in that. And it doesn't necessarily, I mean, and I think the important thing is that this is what God is about. It doesn't mean that a government is necessarily supposed to do that. Not that the government should be, you know, I mean, it messes up when we try to make a system when that system is not the church.
Right.
This is about the kingdom of heaven, you know, and it's about grace, you know. I love that she emphasized that salvation is not earned for the Jews. Did that surprise anyone but me? I mean, I kind of get it, but you know, you don't think of that. You know, you don't think of it in Jesus terms. I don't know. It kind of broadened it for me.
And I like part of her overall message, her overarching message in all of these chapters is trying to bring our Bible interpretations away from an anti-Semitic reading of them.
Mhm.
And a lot of this chapter was talking about how we would assume that the 6 o'clock people were the Jews and that they were the ones that were last, and the Gentiles were the ones that were the 5 o'clock people and being included, and that they were being favored, and that wasn't true. But listening to the women in this group, I don't think there's a single one of us that is relating to the 5 o'clock people. Like, for home because we're all relating to the 6 o'clock people. So I don't think that we're reading it in an anti-Semitic way, because we're relating to those people.
Yeah. Yeah. Susan, you had something?
Yeah, I had a same thing in her video when she said, talking about grace, that grace was a Jewish concept and that it came to the Christians through the Jews. I'd never heard that in my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it certainly is not, it's not even a Jewish, I mean, an Old Testament word. Grace is not.
Where she was coming from on that, and how they, how to accept it or deal with it, how to think about it,
I think that I think, Heather said, yeah, but they were chosen. Yes, the grace of offering to make a covenant with Abraham, of God holding out his hand and saying, join me. Yes, we need to step into that. The Old Testament Jews need to step into it, but that is grace. It's the first move, it's the move toward humanity, and it was undeserved.
And so you're saying that when God chose Israel to be his people, that was him offering them his grace.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that the Jews were the first people of grace, to receive grace.
Yeah. And then, because they needed to form a nation, it was only for the Jews because they had to become themselves. And then Jesus corrected that and says, wait, so like, you're a Jewish people now, but really God is about everybody, even the 11th hour folks.
So now you have your identity. We need to move beyond that.
Yeah. And so here's what I also thought in this that was quite, I loved the picture. I'd never seen it this way, but I love the picture or the image of the folks at 5 o'clock really needing to work. They need the kingdom of heaven. Yes, they need a day's wage, but the kingdom of heaven is like the laborers in the field. And so that need, and when you think of it that way, I love that it changes it a little bit, because there's something about working in the field, like ML was saying, you have the peace, the joy, the whatever of being a field worker your whole life, and that in itself is payment. You know what I'm saying? That is being part of the kingdom of heaven is payment in itself. Yeah. ML, let's see.
And the real thing to me is the peace and the joy that I've had all my life, that I look at people who are not believers, who are fearful of the future. They're fearful of death. They're afraid of their neighbors, and they just live in fear. And how sad that is to me.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that fear.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Yes. Wonderful. Okay. Well, I actually do have, I'm going to look at this a little bit, because I, of course, did a PowerPoint. Oh, I need to do it. Hang on a second. The way this thing works, I need 3 screens, y'all. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Okay, slideshow. Okay. And now, of course, I can't do that. One sec. Okay, maybe I can do this way. Sorry about that. Here we go. So I'm going to, sorry. Okay, so the whole thing about the kingdom, we talked about how it's in Matthew only. I wanted to talk about the Matthew 20 context of the parable. If you look in Matthew, so it's right before he kind of is headed to Jerusalem. You know, it's before he's headed to the crucifixion. And I think it's important, you know, when we read she's talking now, it's important to notice that the first century Jews would not have a Matthew 20 context. You know, we're adding an understanding onto that, and the understanding that we're adding onto it is Matthew's understanding, because Matthew put it here for a reason. You know, so as we study parables or whatever texts, we look at the context of where it is in the story, and we compare it. Is it in the other gospels and all of that? So anyway, I think it's important to notice that it's good to strip away everything and just hear it like a first century Jew would, because there's meaning there, but there's also meaning in the context of the, you know, of where the evangelist, the author of the gospel, has put that and what point they're trying to make with it. And of course, just the fact that this is one of the last ones before he's headed to the cross is, you know, it gives it a great deal of weight in his, you know, at least in the evangelist understanding. Okay, we talked about the title. So
Ellen,
yes,
Ellen.
yeah.
And it's interesting that in Matthew 19,
Uh-huh.
verse 30, he says, but many who are the greatest now will be the least important then, and those who seem least important now will be the greatest then. That's right before he goes into this parable story.
Yes, and he's speaking to, because it is about, I mean, though it is about laborers in a field and it's about a landowner or a householder, it's also about the Jews who are going to end up killing him. You know, the established religion of the time, the church. I mean, I always bring it around that the church, like, it's us. You know, if you want to know who put Jesus on the cross, the people of the day, it's us, it's the church. So we need to watch out what we're missing, because they were missing stuff. And yeah, so he is making that tie together, but he's also talking about the humility that the Jews need to be humble. The church needs to be humble, you know. So good point. So in this, the predisposed reading, we talked about how the at least in the NRSV, the title of this is "The Laborers in the Field," in the vineyard, that is. And so titles, you know, we have predispositions when we come to it, and the more we can set them off for any kind of reading in the Bible, the better we're going to hear. The Spirit is going to use it more. And so it makes me think of that Ignatian imaginative, you know, entry into a parable. You can see this from the worker standpoint, from the standpoint of the landowner. Like, what if I were, you know, what if I were one of those workers? What if I were at this time or this time or this time? What if I were the landowner, which actually the church in physical ways is the landowner, because we are the kingdom of heaven. You know, we're the kingdom of heaven on earth. We are Christ to the world. So that gives us more, more perspective. What about the perspective of the field? And we talked a little bit about that today. You know, I don't know what I was going to say about that. So about the wage, and then what about the fruit and the harvest? So you can see any parable. I think it's important to you know, as we spend time in our own personal journey, to be willing to go deeper. I liked her transliteration. Let's see. I mean, this lady would be fun to have as a prof. You'd get tired of the anti-Semitic stuff, but
Paperback books that doesn't start until page 213, so it's going to be a different page number.
yeah. Okay. Does anybody want to read that for us? It's a little bit backwards.
I don't know where it is.
213? Is that what you're saying?
Chapter starts.
Say it again. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, just read that that what she's done to transliterate the Greek. She took this straight from the Greek.
I don't know what page.
I can read. You just want the opening.
Find the page.
Yeah, just read it's the beginning of chapter 7. Just read that beginning of that.
For is like the kingdom of heavens to a man, a householder who went out in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. And agreeing with the workers for the denarius of the day, he sent them into his vineyard. And going out around the third hour, he saw others standing in the marketplace without work. And to those he said, you go, even you, into the vineyard, and whatever is just, I will give you. And they went. And again, going out around the 6th and also the 9th hour, he did likewise. And around the 11th, going out, he found others standing, and he says to them, why here are you standing all the day without work? They say to him, because no one has hired us. He says to them, you go, even you, into the vineyard. When evening came, says the Lord of the vineyard to his steward, call the workers and give to them their wage reward, beginning with the last ones to the first ones. And coming, those around the 11th hour, they received each a denarius. And coming the first, they thought that more they would receive. And they received each a denarius, even they. And receiving, they were grumbling against the householder. They were saying, these last ones 1 hour did, and equal to us them you have made, to the ones having borne the burden of the day and the burning heat. And answering one of them, he said, friend, not do I harm you. Did not for a denarius you agree with me? Take what is yours and go. And I wish to this last one, to give as even to you. Or is it not permitted to me what I wish to do with what is mine? Or is your eye evil because I am good? Thus will be the last first and the first last.
Wow, thanks. Yes, and the deal about the eye, is your eye evil because I am good? Are you envious because I am generous? So yeah. You know, the generosity of the householder, the landowner, is so, man, to me, that is like the big O theme. It's about the generosity of the landowner. So we talked about, what is just. The thing I don't like about the denarius being salvation is that you earn it. You go into the field and you work for whatever it is. But the deal is, I think what he's saying to the Jews who have been there for all day is you can't earn it. It's not about earning. I give you what you need for the day. I give you what you need for the day, and you are in my kingdom. You are living and working in my kingdom. But I also give, it can't be earned. You're not earning it. You're in the kingdom working, and we've agreed that I'll give you a living wage. I'll give you everything you need for the day, the daily bread. I'll give you your daily bread. And I'll give the 11th hour people their daily bread, because I am generous and I have this much to give. And it's not about earning. Yeah. Yeah. Whew. And I do think the first and the last is a big deal, because the Jews, the church of the day, the faithful ones of the day, were the last. They got there first, but they got to get in line, because there's people, but they're going to get everything they have, the agreement is there. They have all of the benefits of the kingdom. Let's see here. I lost my cursor. There it is.
It's kind of like faith. You don't earn it.
Yeah, faith is given.
Mhm.
Yeah. We think that we should somehow grow it or something, and all we need is a mustard seed, right?
Yeah.
So I think I want to say something. She didn't really talk about this, but I think there's something about comparing. I think there's a note that we need to take from it, of comparing ourselves to others. Because when we do that, what sins can creep in?
Envy,
Envy,
jealousy,
jealousy,
pride.
Right, yeah.
pride, hate.
Superiority.
Mm-hmm. The community is broken. The brotherhood is broken, right? It splits us, right? And I think it's huge that man, if we compare ourselves, fear comes in, fear of, I'm like, so-and-so got all this, I'll never have all that. Maybe, what did I do wrong? Why am I, no. The denarius is there for everyone. What you need for the day from God is there from God. Okay, yeah. And I just think that that's huge. And I've seen that. So I have a friend of mine and I, once you're in a relationship, like marriage or friendship or whatever, and you can't help but compare. A friend of mine and I made a pact. Okay, we're not comparing. It ties you to people in ways that are unhealthy. It creates, I call it stringy love. We need to have unconditional love, no strings attached, and comparing creates stringy love. Anyway, if these guys that have been there all day, they had these three guys not been there, they would have been just fine with it, right? They received what they were promised. And so I think there's a big deal of not comparing.
I think that's all boils down to the thinking someone got something for nothing.
Yeah. I mean, even in aging, why do I have this going on? I was there all along, I was this person. Why is this way? And why does so-and-so who didn't do as, they weren't as faithful a follower, they don't have these problems that I have? I mean, I think that comparing is a huge, I don't know.
Dangerous.
It's very slick slope.
Yeah. And it's like a vat of, I agree. So,
It's dangerous.
Ellen,
yeah.
Ellen, expectation is also a big problem.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened in this story. Those who went to work first expected more because of what the others had been paid. And when we live that way, when we go into a situation expecting X, Y, Z, and MNO shows up instead.
Yeah, right. Yes. And now it's interesting on this one, at first their expectations were just to get a day's wage,
Right. But
yeah. And let's just say that let's change the parable a little bit, and the third, sixth, and third, sixth, ninth, 11th hour folks aren't part of it, but you just are dealing with the 6 people who showed up at the very beginning of the day. And there's one of them who's working a lot harder, right? So we talked about that a little bit too. It's like, they all agreed to a day's wage, and one is working harder because that's who they are. And it's unfair. Then all of a sudden, wait, I should get more, like Cynthia was talking about.
Kind of like the family, the oldest child and the youngest child.
Yeah. Anyway, I
think it's different when you have, it's a landowner, and I think it's different when because we're talking about, comparing that with the kingdom of God and Jesus and God, and then we got to the government. I think those are all very, very different things.
yes, yes.
Yeah, all of it is. Yeah. There's so many aspects of this. Yes. Anyway, okay, well, you got some questions. Apparently Heather had to go help her son, and so she's going to try to get back when she can. But let's go into the breakout rooms, and you've got your questions, and I'll see y'all in about 20 something minutes. Look at whatever questions you really want to spend the time on, because I gave you more than you can do in this time. Okay, great.
Where were the questions?
Did you
send them to us?
Yes, I sent them as an attachment to a post last night.
Yeah, it's around.
I've stopped putting them on the events because the events, it's like the management of the attachments doesn't really work because it.
Go to our group and then go to files.
Yeah, you can go to the group and go to files. That's right.
Well, I see. I've got it now.
Okay, let me see here. Okay, here we go.
What did I do, Ellen?
So yeah, you were we could hear you before you got here.
Woo! I'm like God. I'm speaking to the world.
It's like a hot mic.
Wow. Okay, then good I didn't say anything about you, Ellen.
I'm so glad.
You were good. You were good.
Grace covers a lot. Anything in your groups that came out that you want to share beyond what we've talked about? I thought it was a great discussion, y'all. I mean, what depth in that that parable that he gave us.
Well, those are really good questions.
Yes, they were.
Oh, good. I like that. I don't get that often.
You were graced by God in writing those.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure. Okay,
Definitely got some new perspective on that parable.
good. I'm stopping recording and let's do joys and concerns.
Please do.
Holy God, we are so grateful for the gift of this parable and for Jesus and his wisdom and words and the way that he stretches us. Thank you for the reminder to be about those around us, and thank you for the reminder not to compare ourselves with others. Thank you for your grace that is just what we need for the day, and for thank you for good work in the field and for all that comes with being in the kingdom of heaven. Help us always to have eyes for others who may be needing to join. And we lift up all of these concerns, those who are in surgery right now, those who are facing surgery, loved ones. We pray particularly for Melanie and Morgan, and for relief from pain, and for each one of the cares that was mentioned. Walk with us and keep us. It continues to be such a marathon, and help us to know that you are running with us, that we are not alone, and keep our eyes on you and on your kingdom and on your call to what that means for us each day. Be with us and keep us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. It was a good study today.
Yeah, great.
Yes.
Mhm.
Peace be.
Everybody have a good week. Have a good couple weeks, so I won't be here next week.
Okay.
Okay, safe travels.
For you.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.